It's the 14th of November 2017. And I'm here with a very good friend of mine of maybe 30 years, Don Bridgeman. Don Bridgeman has the uh, importance in my life of having been the owner of the mortgage bank that gave me the first loan for my first home. And so no, well, not my first home, my second home, but the home I live in now after 23 years. So he'll always be dear to me. Don, good afternoon. How are you?
I am very good.
I thought it important to just record this because, you're such a dynamic person, so important in the Washington, D.C. area. Someone from Grenada, I'm from Dominica, but someone who's meant a lot to our community. Let me ask a few questions about your life and then, the Grenada Revolution and the Caribbean community here in the United States.
Okay.
Where were you born?
I was born in Grenada, March 14, 1939. I'm now 78 years old.
And what town in Grenada?
I was born in Grenville, of course, the best town in Grenada.
That's right. That's right. And who was your mother? Give us her name.
Mother was Madonna Teresa Bridgman. She was not married to my father because of family relationship. And as an only child, she caught hell and three sticks, if you probably know that in Dominica, to bring me up as
Yes.
the only child.
And what was your father's name?
Julian Bridgman.
Yes. And where did you attend school?
I attend school right there in Grenville. I remember as a little boy going to many of those infant school, as you call them, which was usually in somebody's house or underneath the step or something. And then from that, I went to the Catholic schools in Grenville and went through Catholic school until I turned, I think it was 18, could not afford to go to secondary school, as you knew, in the Caribbean that time because Dominica was part of the Grenada, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, Dominica Commonwealth under England. And of course, you had the Presentation College and you had the GBSS, the Grenada Boys Secondary School, and the St. Joseph Convent. That's where the people who could afford. But it would have cost $14 a month or a year for me to board in the city to go to school. We did not have school in the country. My father.
I mean, you didn't have a secondary school.
We didn't have the secondary schools in the country.
That's
So
right.
to go to secondary school, I had to go away. And my mother couldn't afford it, and my father didn't never give me the money, so I never went. But I stayed in the school, and the teachers, the head teachers, bless their heart. Those of us who couldn't afford, like Ira Sonny and Don Bridgman, we stayed in the school. The tutor tutored us privately after school and at night and in their homes, the head teachers, for what was known as the first year and second year and third year examinations beyond the eighth grade. We passed those examinations, and that's how I became a school teacher.
So how long did you teach school?
Well, I taught school for about the first 3 years. We couldn't get paid because you're too young. I was just like 17, 18 years old. So the head teacher paid us from his pocket. But then I stayed about 2 to 3 years afterwards. I had passed the British exam, most of us. Those time was overseas examination, you call General Certificate of Education. And nowhere to go. There were 26 schools on the island. 26. Okay, so that means there are 26 principals. I was at the level where the only thing you do is to wait for a principal to die to get a position. And I was only 24 years old.
So where were you teaching? What school?
I was teaching in St. Andrew's RC, a Roman Catholic school in Grenville.
So what year was that you started?
Let's see, I started in 1950, 57, 58.
Okay. And then what year did you come to the United States?
In 1963,
How did you come here, though?
well, the circumstance under which I come here, I probably should not put on tape, but basically, I wasn't the best person on earth. So some young lady that I was seeing became pregnant, and the school, those days, the schools were controlled by the priest. The priest told me I had to get married. And I said, well, Father, I live with my mother. I only have a little iron bed that's 2 feet wide. I don't have any place to put a wife. How am I going to marry? And you only pay me $26 a month, which is less than $1 per day. So I said, I can't get married. I just want to resign then. They wouldn't let me resign. So God bless a guy called Sonny Mark, Joachim Mark. I wrote to him in America. He was from Howard University. He was here and graduated and became an engineer. And he encouraged me to come to college, to university. I could have done so because I had the British equivalent of a high school certificate. And so I left. The priest would not accept my resignation. I left Grenada on August 2nd, 1963, and I traveled. I left Grenada in late July. I traveled to Barbados, and I left Barbados on August 2nd, where you pick up your visa to come to the United States, and came to New York. And I have been here since then. In September, I came down to Washington, D.C. to go to Howard University. That's September 1963, and I am here since.
What did you study at Howard?
Well, before I studied at Howard, I had a great shock when I came to Howard and came down to Washington. Another friend of mine, Franklin Francis, was living with me. I got a job on the switchboard, and I had one of the most down days in my life that same September, because the beloved worldwide President John F. Kennedy was shot, and all of us went in shock, not only here, but throughout the Caribbean and many parts of the world.
That was November 22nd, 1963.
That's exactly right.
That's right. So you were working the switchboard.
I was working the switchboard, and I was going to Howard University.
How did you get the news?
Well, it was all over the air and the radio. At that time, we didn't have television, but heard it on radio. It was all over the air, and everybody knew.
Yes.
So that's how I got that.
So what did you study at Howard? What subjects, what degree did you get?
Okay, my first degree was in economics and political science. Now, I never had any science, so I couldn't do the medical things and the I just didn't have any science, because I didn't go to high school. So I had people skills because I was in scouting, I was in teaching, I was in St. John's Brigade, I was in community activities. So I always related to people. I even campaigned for MZ Mark. So I went into something that was people skills, and that was political science.
I see.
Now, when I was doing political science, I took other courses, the biology and so on. In fact, when I got the first 2 times I took biology, I got a D. And no, I failed. And you had to take biology. I took it a third time and I got a D. When I got that D, I kneeled down and kissed the ground to thank God for making me pass that course.
Yes.
And then I went on with my political science. And
did you do a master's at a certain point?
yeah, well, before I finished, I spent 5 years doing the bachelor's because I discovered a subject called economics. I wasn't good in math. After I got to geometry and analysis, so you call that, I couldn't get into the trigonometry and all. I didn't have that skill. But I was good in something in people skills, and economics is a people skill. So I got into economics and I discovered that I was good at it. So I spent an extra year to do more economics, and then I ended up with a double major, economics and political science, for my bachelor's degree.
And you have a master's degree.
I had a master's degree. I did get married after I graduated, and I had started to have children, and so I was working. So I did my master's degree whilst I was employed. I did my master's degree attending college on weekends only for 18 months.
Was that Howard?
No, that was Southeastern University in
Wonderful.
Washington, D.C.
And when did you graduate?
I graduated, 1975,
Wonderful.
because I had a space in between their work and whatnot.
Before we talk about your role in the county government, tell us about Unison Whitman and the Grenada Association.
Well, when I came here in 63, I came and met a group of Grenadians who were living on 16th Street, 16th and New Street, 19, I forget the number of the apartment there. People like Rupert Ambrose, Gerald Hailing, Unison Whitman, and so on were there. And with
Is that the same Unison Whitman who was in the Revolution, who died with Bishop?
That's right.
Okay.
You see, I had the skills at home in community development and community organization. So we created what I called the United Grenadians in Washington, D.C. at the time. Unison Whitman was our first speaker to that group. The people like Stanley Cyrus and others who were here then. Most of us was from Howard University because at that time most of the Grenadians down here either came to Howard or, to get some work. And basically that organization supported Unison Whiteman, who wanted to go to Grenada to get involved. Gary was, of course, the Prime Minister of Grenada, and there was one group there who was fighting Gary separately. That group came from England, and it was led by Maurice Bishop. And then Unison Whiteman group came from Howard University, and we were supporting him from here. And then there was a third group, and those were folks who were at the University of the West Indies in Jamaica. Among them was Bernard Code. So they had these separate groups fighting Gary by different names, and they decided to come together because they could there's strength in unity, and then they formed what they call the Jewel Movement, Joint Endeavor for Economic Welfare and Law. And so that's how the Jewel, then the new Jewel came, and it was the new Jewel that actually put on the revolution. And of course, we know the story of the revolution from there.
Why do you believe the revolution failed?
One of the reasons the revolution failed, and I would say primarily there are many reasons, but one that I know personally is because of the personalities of the people who were there. Bernard Code, who I knew quite well because we were in scouting together, he was in St. George's with the GBSS, I was in Grenville. And Bernard Code, I heard say with my own eyes in 1957 and with my own ears, the 50th year of scouting in the world. We had a jamboree, a world jamboree in Trinidad. And I remember Bernard Code saying, if he's at point A and has to go to point C by passing through point B, and his mother is in point B, preventing him from going to point C, she's going to have to go.
What did that tell you about the man?
That told me, it made my blood shrink, and that told me to be scared to hell of him. And that of me. From that time, I always knew Bernard Code, and I knew his ambition. I didn't know his wife, but I always heard about Jamaicans. And when I heard that his wife was Jamaican, I was right here in Washington, and I had a lot of problems. So I was not surprised that Bernard Code wanted to have power, had the ambition to be the leader, and I was always concerned that both Unison and Bishop was in danger.
So when did the news come to you that the revolution was collapsing or there were difficulties?
I was living in Northwest Washington. I'd gone to church service in a church which is pretty much now, it's a Catholic church right on Park Road. It is now pretty much a Hispanic church. And that's when we got the news from Grenada. By that time, phone calls coming through, and that's at the date of the revolution. That's where I was.
Yes, that's when the revolution took place.
That's right.
What about when it collapsed?
Well, that's another pretty long story.
Yes.
We were getting constant reports from Grenada, and there were so many things because in what they were trying to do with the building of the airport, that's in that period of time the revolution belonged to collapse, and people were thinking that it was only the Cubans that were involved. Bringing the Cubans to Grenada was a big issue, but we used to preach from here that the British was involved and many other countries were involved. because, for example, the British were the ones that were doing the lighting. The other group I'm trying to remember now,
When you see the lighting on the airport.
the lighting on the airport, and I'm trying. The Canadians were providing for the air traffic control. Yes, so it wasn't just a Cuba thing, but a lot of things went on to, I'm not as qualified as many others, but I know lots of different things went on to disturb the revolution.
I'm just going to ask you two more questions. One about your role here in the county as a chief administrative officer for the county government, and then your view on the future of the Caribbean community and the Caribbean.
Well, since I was from the Caribbean, I got involved in a number of Caribbean things here. Quite frankly, I'm proud to say that at this date, there is still a Caribbean Association of students at the Prince George's Community College. The Caribbean Council started that. And just to give you a thing, anytime you or any friend go to the Prince George's Community College, which has been expanded greatly, if you're going to have any meal there in the cafeteria, look up. In the ceiling, you're going to see a whole ceiling paved with flags from all countries all over the world. The Grenadians and St. Vincent's and Dominicans in the Caribbean Council, under my leadership, donated the first 14 flags from the Caribbean countries to this Caribbean Association there. We had a parade, and after the parade, the flags were donated to the school, and the school put them in the cafeteria. And from that, every other nation that came had a flag added in the cafeteria.
Any final words, Brother
Well,
Bridgeman, for
basically,
the young Caribbean people coming up? What are the things they should look to do to help strengthen the community?
well, there are a few things, but one I would say is unity. Here we have one Caribbean organization in Prince George's County. That's the Caribbean Council of Prince George's County, which composed of members and folks from all over the Caribbean, and was later even joined in another organization by the Filipinos. But if you note, Gabriel, one thing here, every one of the Caribbean organization have their own, Caribbean countries have their own organization here. Some of them, like Trinidad, have 4 and 5, like Jamaica have 6 and 7. I'm sure Dominica, Grenada, Grenada have about 3 or 4. And it's good, but a lot of those don't participate in community things. And as you bring that up, I've talked about this before. There is something that happened before you and I got here that I wish would happen again. And that, I think, is the future. We need to get together. Before you and I came here, Grenada, St. Vincent, St. Lucia, and Dominica was a commonwealth under the British, with government, I think, in Grenada. But the fact is, they worked together. Wherever limes came from, it came to St. Lucia, because that's where the lime factory was. Whoever had nutmeg sent it to Grenada. Okay, each of the islands had their role, and we were able to develop things. Now, the islands are too small, and the economy is too small to survive on their own, to support a full government, and that's, I think, our biggest problem. And the same thing here. Caribbean folks here are not working together. You and I know that we were both asked to serve on a Caribbean committee put forward on the basis of the governor at the urgings of Caribbean people. When the government changed from Democrat to Republican, we never heard anything about that committee anymore.
That's right. Brother Bridgman, I intend to interview you again, but I just wanted to capture some of your, very exciting life, very colorful life, very instructive life, and very contributive life for posterity, because you've done a lot here in the county. You've also done a lot for Grenada and the wider Caribbean. You've always been a leader, and we're proud of you, sir.
Well, thank you very much. Just do what I can.
Yes, indeed.